Kondegi for La République du Cameroon, all were boys and for inside part of Bamendan for all the period the church and the hustle inside this coronavirus season. I pray to make all a day top and in good health and strength. This one on my brother Dr. G. I don't come again inside this story way. I don't decide for begin the put out there for educate what people them, which I don't call them political education. And I don't put out a number of audios and videos them on the subject already. This one will be now the third series where I don't put them out so far. So I post them mostly from my YouTube page, and I share them from my Facebook page and on those social media platforms and like on WhatsApp. Make una check out the first two sessions, the first two episodes, and just check them. For the first couple of first two episodes, particularly the first episode, I don't struggle for make a case why we need to focus on internal mobilization, why we need to organize ourselves on the ground. The second episode, I focus a bit on the doctrine of the just war. And for this episode, I want to focus about the international community, understanding the international community. At the beginning of this revolution, especially as most of we be very new to this subject, we get a lot of heightened expectations. Say international community, international system, we mostly interpret them as UN and UN related organizations that could just come in for can intervene from Amazonia for bring we the freedom and the liberation we fight for. I want to make as we don't understand for the last couple of years, we'll get a just cause. Our case be established within a well settled historical circumstance. So legally and historically and looking at the functioning of the system, we'll get a very valid case. And a lot of people would ask themselves the question, then why be straightforward for the international community for just step in, intervene, withdraw the map, take it back to 1972 or to 1961 or to 1958 when the UK began hand over the trusteeship territory back to Southern Cameroonians, and just get things back to that level. Where the reason is because international system be a very complex space that we get to do the management of the relationship of between nations, rooted in international law and backed and influenced by a lot of personal interest. So now international system is a classical case of a scenario where we have laws and we have rules and regulations that are supposed to regulate the way nations interact with each other, but it's a system that is far from perfect. It's far from perfect. It functions and operates within certain realities, which every struggle like our own must come to terms with in order to build realistic expectations about what exactly the international system will do. So for this particular series on understanding international community, I get a series of objectives. I want to be able to explain, when we talk of international community, who they be, how they function. I want to be able to explain how they intervene to defend their interests. I want to be able to explain when, how and why they intervene in situations of conflicts. I want to be able to also highlight through that process the setup of African diplomacy and the role they play inside the current international system, and then ultimately for be able to come down to a conclusion where they explain why we get to then create realistic expectations, and why I feel say we ultimately need to temper down the expectations so we get them from about the intervention of the international community and switch our attention pretty much to changing the dynamics on the ground. And when I talk about the dynamics on the ground, I'm making an argument both for the current rapport de force in terms of the guerrilla warfare, the right to self-defense, and that we are responding to at the moment since the war that was declared by BIA. But I want to add an additional dimension, which I think it's something that has been neglected thus far, which is very critical. Now, a big blind spot. I don't describe them as internal mobilization, which is essentially the political aspect of mobilizing the domestic stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, now that's two components that go determine the way forward. I'm not going to dwell too much about this. By the time I make this presentation finish about the international community, I go down build a case for why I feel say we need to focus very much on the internal mobilization. So make one just stick to me. I will struggle to put this one in a series of episodes. They don't advise me, say I try to keep the video very short. So I will try to make this one intervention a series of 15-minute videos. And by the time I want to go through the range of points and where I want to make them, I will see how many videos and how many parts it will come up to. So the first thing, just to lay a background to the conversation. This one will be in episode 3, part 1. Just to lay a background to the conversation. I want to make you understand, say, the Ambazonian situation, not just one conflict among a multitude of conflicts and with the international system they deal with. And with every system of that nature faced with this kind of reality, they get the obligation for prioritize. I could eventually come explain in one of the other episodes then the circumstances around which the international community intervenes. Basically, anytime you get any international community intervention, especially in our experience in the post-collapse of the Berlin Wall context, it don't be usually typically in two instances: in the instance of gross human rights violation, or out of some geopolitical reordering of the interest of strategic players. All of them will be coined around the responsibility to protect, the responsibility or the rights to, how to describe that thing. From the African Union perspective, we don't move from the principle of non-intervention to the principle of non-indifference in the face of gross human rights violation. And in the actual operation of the international system from the United Nations perspective, there are certain, I know we'll go into all the details and the complexities of how that entity is organized. My mission is just to communicate a simple argument for say make we get the right expectations about the context around which intervention fit occur, how it will fit occur, what can they do and what can they not do, and then to be able to paint a realistic picture of where our own situation sits in the priority of, in the list of things that happen at the moment. Now, all of we already know, say, the international system at the moment get lots of things the way they handle. Apart from the COVID-19 situation where you don't take the steam out of the focus on our struggle, they don't come from an era where we focus a lot on global terrorism as a priority on the list of priorities in the international system. Of course, a lot of countries they use them for advance their foreign policy, but the official lingo, the official language where they use them for make that case, the case of global terrorism. Now, why that in the wake of this Ambazonian struggle, you're going to realize and say Boko Haram in the north and Boko Haram in Nigeria don't always want to be used as the overshadowing element by which priority definition will be established within the Gulf of Guinea, particularly between Cameroon and Nigeria. So that one at the top there on the list. So international community gets the question of global terrorism where they deal with. International community get the question of the conflict in the Middle East that is longer and bloodier and is costing more lives on a daily basis. Now, human life be extremely sacred, and I do not need to make this presentation with the objective of simplifying our own personal loss, but make we understand, say, as far as the extent to which the international community conscience could be pricked by the number of people the way they die as a result of this conflict or as a result of our fight, will be way down the list. If you take a practical example of the Rwandan genocide, official representatives will get up to 1 million people will eventually die. And even in the case of the Rwandan genocide, now we'll talk about 1 million people, depending on what statistics you're working for, you want to focus on. We're talking about, some people they say the total Ambazonian people, population, both home and abroad, is somewhere between 4 and 5 million. We see the total number of Ambazonian population or Southern Cameroonian population are 4 million for the sake of the argument. It means that the number of people that died for Rwandan genocide, now 25% of our population, 1 in every 4. So when you look Bamenda, look Boya, look Limbe, look your family, look the one that they America, look the they at home, the proportion of the human cost of the Rwandan genocide within our context, that caused international outcry is 1 in 4. So every 1 or 4 of us, if we should inside room 20, count 5 people, and then spread that one across Ambazonia, just for we to get to the stage of intensity of a humanitarian crisis of the level of the Rwandan genocide, to be able to raise the kind of international outcry commensurate to that which happened in Rwanda. Of course, we're talking about human lives here, so nobody is suggesting that we should have that as an objective. I just want to make people then develop a realistic expectation as far as I'm concerned. And to make we remember, say, even in the case of the Rwandan genocide, 2 practical things happen. The Rwandans today accuse France of turning their eyes on that side. In fact, when the genocide was going on, it is established that there were French and I think UN troops on the ground. This is different from what we're talking about in the case of Ambazonia, in the case of Southern Cameroon. As you and I talk at this moment, so we don't even get the presence of international troops. I think of some people where they don't make a case for the establishment of an international fact-finding mission. In the case of Rwanda, you had both the UN and France already on the ground in the midst and in the heat of the genocide. Now, why the Rwandans today blame France for turning a blind eye? France is a member of the UN Security Council. Don't forget. So international systems are an extremely complicated animal. And even within the context of the presence of both the UN and France, I speak under correction on the presence of the UN, but it's established that France was present in terms of troops between the belligerent and the fighting parties, that did not stop 1 million people from being massacred. And at the end of the massacre of those 1 million people, it was still not the United Nations systems or the UN systems that resolved the question of Rwanda post that conflict. It was because there was a certain Paul Kagame that had support from, I'm not one to establish his sources, who was already on his way in the bush pursuing a liberation struggle, that he was able to upset the balance of power on the ground. So not even after 1 million people did the international system in Rwanda intervene to give them solutions as to how they were going to construct their country. It took a certain Paul Kagame with a certain military presence, with support from the region, to define the future of Rwanda. So maybe we'll create realistic expectations as far as which you would think the international community should do. Our expectations will be extremely realistic. We need to situate our conflict within the context of the other ongoing conflicts. It is stated, say, within the African continent, there are almost 36 so-called secessionist movements. At the moment, Africa as a continent gets 54 countries. There are up to 36 secessionist movements, which from the context of African unity and the role of the African Union, now they just lump them together as a collective trade. There's almost secessionist movement in almost every African country. We should get us to understand that African countries, post the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, see the nation state as sacred, and their default reaction would not be to break up any country. All of the recently created countries that we have currently on the continent, from Eritrea to South Sudan and related issues, there was no, it was the function, or let me put it this way, whoever came from the international community to accompany them through the process of the creation of that country came to support initiatives that were already on the ground. We cannot mortgage this fight, the responsibility of the construction of our future, into the hands of the international community. They simply do not have the mechanisms to do that for us. They are not also set up to do that for us. And as I go through this series, you're going to understand the circumstances in which they intervene for us to be able to create a realistic expectations of whether or not they will intervene in our situation, and if they do intervene, what exactly they will be intervening to accomplish. That we need to have at the back of our minds, because it's going to ultimately cause us, bring us to a place where we would be able to create strategies that focus on creating synergy and focusing our efforts in the areas that matter the most, which in my sense is very much dependent upon how much we have a national Southern Cameroonian conversation. A Southern Cameroonian conversation about our collective future as a people. And if we're going to have that conversation, we would need to then come to terms with the fact that there are certain people that we don't like because of the stance that they have taken as far as our struggle is concerned, but that who in the broader scheme of things are stakeholders that would have to sit on the table for that national conversations to happen. So the international system gets all of these various realities the way we need to take into account, and the Ambazonian crisis now get to fit within that scale of preference. Just to explain for you the number of things the way, as I wrap up this particular episode, the number of other priorities that they sit on the international scale. So you get the conflict in the Middle East, you get the threat of Russian expansionism in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We don't see what Russia do for Ukraine and Crimea, the gas dependency of mainland Europe on Russian gas, the fear of the whole revival of a Cold War scenario. So in terms of priorities within the European Union and the global system, they look Russia with suspicion. That is a priority. If you come even down to the African context, the conflict in the DRC, in terms of number of lives lost on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, it's way above that which we're experiencing in Ambazonia. You don't hear people talk about it. It's a conversation for a different day, but just to get all of us to be able to understand that the complexities within the function of the international system sometimes beat our imagination. We still deal with China's economic rise. It preoccupies the global community, particularly America at the moment. Chinese economic expansionism and the implications for the establishment of a future global world order. There is unrest within the Franc-Afrique configuration. Conversations around the franc CFA, unrest within certain African countries, and by virtue of our association with the Republic Committee for the last couple of years, will be drawn into that conflict. There is, of course, British Brexit and the implication of the rise of British nationalism and the implication for the function of the European Union. There are American domestic challenges. The whole unrest that is around the presidency of Trump. This is an election year. There's a European Union refugee crisis that comes as a result of Brexit and the position of Europe in the world. So the international system gets all these things that they shit on to your hand. Ambazonian conflict and the conflict and our search for independence, now our number one priority, but we get competing influence and competing issues. So I want to just paint this picture as a scenario of where to be on the agenda of the international community at the moment. I will come to in the next episode for briefly explain the implications of that widespread, that broad agenda, as well as the various actors then, which of their priorities and the context with which they intervene. Must not be specific audio at this point. I beg una like them, una share them, una subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then una also give me feedback about what you think about this conversation. But look out for the next 2-3 episodes.